I'm a lead writer of the FT. Unfortunately, we don't produce economic forecasts. What we do is produce a newspaper every day. And as an economist by training, I was quite disappointed at the beginning, saying, "Oh, where's our forecasting model? And what do we do here? We just write a column." But then actually I realized, dealing with the Eurozone day in and day out, realized that actually these forecasts, these numbers which are produced on a daily basis by lots of organizations are often so dependent on political events that having a clear view of what's going on politically could actually turn out to be, if not just as useful or even more useful than having the truth in figures. Now, I picked up some numbers from the OECD, which is an organization which everyone respects, and what they show is that for next year, the Eurozone will shrink just about by 0.1%, with much bigger shrinkages in GDP for Italy and Spain, clearly, and the periphery, and Germany and France doing marginally better, with Germany growing at 0.6%. Now, that's a view. I'm sure other banks will come up with different views. Probably Robin's got a different set of forecasts, probably more pessimistic, I would suppose, from what he's been saying. But generally, the view is that next year there will be slowing down in the pace of the contraction. Maybe the economy will pick up in the second half. We don't know. Maybe that's what Mario Draghi, the president of the ECB, hopes. Maybe that's too optimistic. What we know for sure is that this is not going to be driven by government spending. And that's because austerity will continue in much of the Eurozone. And if you had any doubt, you should just have a look at today's Financial Times. There is a very eloquent piece by Olli Rehn, the vice president of the European Commission, so someone who deals with these things on a daily basis, and says austerity is working. So given that austerity is working, there will probably be no incentive to change the course for the European Commission. I mean, clearly that's not completely true. Spain has been offered a bit more time, so probably there will be some mild relaxation of austerity. But I think no one should expect big increases in government spending over the next 12 months. Now, some are hoping about Germany, a big German stimulus of some sort. Well, don't hold your breath. True, there is an election coming up in the autumn, but a big stimulus doesn't seem to be the way German elections are won these days. You want to probably be on the more conservative side, and we're certainly not going to be seeing that. Second point to make is actually made in this op-ed, which I recommend you should read, because what it's saying is that even if Germany was to open the tap and stimulate its economy massively, that wouldn't really have that much of an effect on the European periphery, on the southern periphery, meaning Italy, Spain, Greece, or even Ireland, just because Germany doesn't really actually trade that much with these countries, but mainly trades with other Central European countries or Eastern European countries. So it's giving the example of a 1% increase in GDP in Germany would only result in a 0.05% increase in GDP in the Eurozone periphery. So pretty slim. Anyway, the point is, the big question is, since the public sector will not really contribute to the recovery, what will happen to the private sector? Will confidence pick up? Now, this is a fundamental economic question, but I think the answer is completely political. And the question is really tied, I think, to two big events which will happen next year. And I will explain. The first one is happening in the spring, and it's in February now, and it's the election in Italy, which is entertaining us now, which has been entertaining us over the last week. I don't know if you've followed the reports. And the second one is what will happen in Germany towards the end of the year, with the election coming up in the autumn. Now, why I say these two events are significant? Because I think they represent the two cornerstones. They represent the two key components of the solution in the Eurozone crisis, if there will ever be one. The first one is what will happen in the peripheral governments and whether they will be able to pass reforms which are needed for their economy to go back to competitiveness. Now, I think some progress has been made in some countries. For example, Portugal and Spain. I think the reforms that passed with regard to the labor market are actually pretty significant, and some effects of that are starting to be seen. You start to see some small rebalancing of their economy. Clearly, a lot of their surpluses a lot of the improvement in the position of their current account is down to the fact that their imports are shrinking. So because their economy is doing so badly, they import fewer goods, which means that their overall net trade figures look better. But I think there is some improvement there. A much bigger question is about Italy, because I think, given the size of the Italian debt, I think problems in the Italian economy will not be easily coped with by the Eurozone. We're talking about 130, the third biggest, fourth in absolute terms, third in relative terms to GDP debt in the world. And the question is whether the economy will be able to, whether the next government will be able to pass the reforms which are needed, which were not done over the last 20 years. Now, I don't know, many of you will have seen and probably been amused, if not worried, by the return of Mr. Silvio Berlusconi. I don't think he's going anywhere, personally. I think he's just provoking a lot of turmoil in the markets. He will get 15 to 20%, no more than that. Bigger question is whether you will see the center-left government which will be formed, which could be either formed on its own by the Democrats on the left, or some sort of coalition with the centrists, maybe with the current technocrats, the favorite of the markets, and I have to say of my own newspaper. In fact, you can see our leader we wrote yesterday, where we urged him to stand in the election, whether they will have the capacity and strength to pass some significant reforms, more than what this government has done. Because I have to say, it's probably been a bit more disappointing than we hoped it to be. So that's on the kind of periphery side. So what I'm saying, the general election in Italy represents what the periphery should do, what individual governments in the periphery should do in order to try and help their economy out of the crisis. Now, why does the German election matter? Well, it matters because there is a second side, which is what Robin has shown in his very pretty image. It's all those blocks. Can the Eurozone be made to work, really? And here, the willingness or what's decided in Berlin is clearly crucial. And that's for 3 or 4 reasons, really. Which I think will be are the important steps to make the euro work. Well, the first one is just a very it's what fascinates our reader a lot. Every time we have an article on Greece, we get lots of clicks. Everyone wants to know about it. Well, it's a small problem, because if you look at the GDP of Greece compared to the GDP of the Eurozone, it's quite small. But first of all, it shows the willingness. It's a very good example of how willing leaders are, or unwilling leaders are, to solve the problems the Eurozone is facing. And secondly, it's because it's a shock which can have consequences, spillovers on the markets and create turbulences. Now, what we've seen so far has been really a big exercise in kicking the can down the road. There have been 2 programs for Greece. There's been some initial signs of recognition of losses. Basically, what we think is that the Greek debt is unsustainable as it is. There have to be write-downs of some sort, whether that means extending the maturity of the loans to, 100 years or something like that, or just basically writing down the principal. Doesn't really matter, but there has to be a recognition of losses. Now, in the last summit, there has been a first step in the right direction. For the first time, governments are taking some hits, not so much on the principal, but on the interest they're charging. We think that's an encouraging sign, and I think the rhetoric suggests that there is an understanding by the core, especially the core Eurozone countries, including Germany, that the problem will have to be looked at again, probably after the election. So I think what happened in the last summit was more encouraging than what had happened in previous ones. It's been a greater recognition, and probably there will be an even greater one once Mrs. Merkel will not have to worry about the electorate anymore. On monetary policy, I think there's been some really good progress with what Mario Draghi has been doing at the ECB over the last summer with this program, with this statement that he would step in and buy bonds of peripheral countries which were to request them, which clearly means Spain and probably Italy. This has helped markets. maybe helped too much in light of some Eurozone members, because it means that Spanish borrowing costs have fallen so low that actually now the Spanish government is thinking twice about asking for help from the ECB. Now, I think this is a very significant development. If you talk to bankers around the city, as I often do, they will tell you that many of them now consider have significantly lowered the risk premium on especially short duration bonds from the periphery, because they think there is a backstop from the European Union, from the European Central Bank. Now, the question is this credible or not? Where Spain to apply for help? The problem is that this mechanism has never been tested. So far, it looks like a big bazooka, but when it's deployed, then it could look actually as a water pistol. And that's why, because if, say, Spain goes and asks for help, the European Central Bank starts buying its bonds and imposes some strict conditions, then the government turns around and says, actually, no, we don't really want to do all these things you've asked us to do. The ECB, in theory, should stop buying these bonds, but if it stops buying this bond, then we have financial mayhem. So will it really do it? Well, how will the Bundesbank behave then? So there are lots of political questions behind this. The question is whether there will be the willingness, I think, to keep the show on the road, and this is something which hasn't really been, which we don't really know. And then there are two other points, which were two of the blocks which Robin placed on his image: the banking union and the fiscal union. Now, on the banking union, again, I think there has been some positive. A banking union meaning transforming really what are now. What is now a fragmented banking sector with country-specific regulator into a more interlocked banking sector, which is supervised by a unique supervisor, which should be the European Central Bank, with a unified bank resolution regime, so that when a bank goes should go bankrupt, this is dealt with at the European level. And thirdly, maybe with a common deposit insurance, which means that all the countries guarantee together all the deposits within the Eurozone. Now, again, one could say this is happening slowly. There is but actually, there are some moves, very interesting moves towards the creation of a supervisor. The ECB, there are lots of talks about. Well, there is lots of talking for sure, maybe not enough action, but you can see there is some progress being made towards making the ECB as a common supervisor, and there are some big discussions over which banks should be supervised, and again there is some strong German resistance over whether all of its Landesbanken, the small banks, should be looked at by the European Central Bank, or whether Germany can keep an eye on them by themselves. So once again, Germany is proving the roadblock. Now, fourth point is the issue of debt mutualization, and whether we'll see a drive towards a mutualization of debt. Now, the European Commission is a strong believer in that. It's put forward all sorts of papers saying, "Oh, this is what should happen." And in theory, the fiscal compact, which you're seeing throughout Europe, where countries are obliged to stick to some pretty strict budget rules, is a first step in that direction. Now, I think that's possibly less necessary. That's our view in the leader writing team, is that actually this is a secondary step. The first step is really to sort out the banks and get the banking union working, and then you can move towards a fiscal union, which is actually a much more politically tricky objective. But the question is will Germany be happy with it? Would you as a German taxpayer be willing to guarantee the debt of those lazy Italians who don't get up at 8 o'clock in the morning to come and speak at conferences? Now, I thought, you know, as I was coming in this morning, I was like, I will try to convince the audience that actually the Germans will be happy with all of this and actually do something about it. And I was like, how am I ever going to convince them? And then I picked up the FT, and I found the answer. And that's because there is a beautiful piece today written by two German by two German writers who say German middle class must save the euro. And they make a very powerful argument. They're not lazy Italians. They're efficient Germans, who say in the case of Germany, however, this, and I quote, the stance of not one more cent for Europe is short-sighted and runs counter to their actual interest. The truth is that if the euro fails, Germany's middle class will pay the highest price. And I think that's the ultimate reason why, however difficult it looks to keep this indeed badly conceived, badly designed currency union, reasonably, I underline, optimistic about the future of the common currency, is that actually German politicians know extremely well that if there was to be a Eurozone breakup, Germany would probably be one of the countries which would suffer the most. And there is an electoral problem at the moment, which is the election coming up in October. But I think that once that's over, we all know, we kind of all know the result is, well, we don't know the results, but we can imagine that there will be some sort of grand coalition, again headed by Angela Merkel, probably with the Social Democrats on board. Now, I think that will give Mrs. Merkel, similarly in a way which is similar to what Robin was describing about the US, will give her a bit more leeway to take some steps which are very important, fundamental, I would say, for the survival of the currency union. But I think that's why I'm saying I am reasonably optimistic about the future of the Eurozone. If not, maybe in 2013, because it's a bit too soon, but for the years ahead. Thank you very much.